Okay, good afternoon and welcome again. My name is Johan Schefferly and I'm happy to take you through the last session of today. And in fact, it is the final session of the EMA Veterinary Awareness Day. And I think this session nicely brings together all the things that we discussed and talked about the last 2 days. And you've seen many aspects of our work. And I think if you think of it, it all comes down to one important thing, and that is that the citizen in the EU can trust that medicines that are put on the market here, veterinary medicines also and human medicines, are of adequate quality and are safe and efficacious. And in order to get the trust, I think there are two very important elements. The first is a strong regulation, and the other is science-based decision-making. And on that last point, we have a scientific committee here that does that work. That is the CVMP. I chair that committee. Next to me is Frida Wikström. She's the vice chair of that committee. And in this session, we are going to address on how we do our work here in the CVMP, how we do the scientific assessment. Also, what is the role and the responsibilities that we have. And of course, it's obvious for everybody that it is important for every citizen in Europe to have that trust. But a strong regulation and a science-based decision-making process is also important for the veterinary industry. So we talk about this also in this session. So, okay, I think I will then stop talking and introduce the first speaker. And that is on my right-hand side, Dr. Frida Wikström. Dr. Frida Wikström is the vice chair, as I said, of the Committee of Veterinary Medicinal Products, the scientific committee here at the EMA. And Frida is a veterinarian by training with a PhD in infection biology and immunology. And her research focused on the interaction between porcine circovirus and the immune system of the pig. And in 2008, Frida joined the Swedish Medicinal Products Agency as a clinical assessor with particular interest in immunological and novel therapy products. She's been representing Sweden as alternate member and member of the CVMP since 2013. And as I said, she's the current vice chair of the CVMP, but she also chairs the Veterinary Scientific Advice Working Party. Frida, over to you.
Thank you very much. And as said, I will talk to you about the CVMP and what our role and responsibilities are, and what we're doing and what we're here for. If you have been listening throughout these 2 days, you will recognize a lot of things that I will bring up in the presentation that have been discussed by others, perhaps in a bit more detail. But I'm coming from the CVMP perspective of these activities and also what our responsibility is and our piece in this network of activities that we have. So the Committee for Veterinary Medicinal Products, or CVMP for short, is one of the scientific committees at the EMA. The EMA has 7 scientific committees. And in this committee we have representation from all EU member states, but there's also representation from Norway and Iceland. And in addition to that, there are 5 members selected based on specific expertise that the committee sees that there is a need for within the committee. So we have 5 additional members, and for example, those that expertise, we have one expert on quality, one on antimicrobial and antimicrobial resistance, and one on environmental risk assessment, for example. And at a very high level, we have some main areas of activities and responsibilities. And of course, that involves evaluations of applications for medicines. That is one of our main activities and responsibilities. And that is for the purpose of ensuring that there are safe and effective medicines for animals. And that is quite clear. But what is also one of our main areas of responsibilities is to look at consumer safety and human and public health questions. And that is done by evaluating residue limits in animals treated with medicines, so that there are no harmful residues left in food coming from those animals. And this is one of the important aspects of our work that we do also. And another cornerstone is that to contribute to the development of medicines, so that we can see and help getting new medicines to the market, and that they can be of benefit to animals on the European market. And this is partly done by stimulating innovation of these medicines. And some basic rules about the CVMP and how it works that needs to be clear is that we are a scientific committee, but we are independent from industry. So there are no ties between CVMP and the industry in terms of financial interest. And there is transparency around these topics in place. There is a clear policy on conflicts of interest that every member of the CVMP has to declare. And also, it needs to be noted that we do not perform any studies. We assess the studies that the industry presents to us when they provide their applications. So we don't own the data, but there is a mechanism where we can control the production of medicines and the companies that produce these data through inspections to make sure that they fulfill their obligations and the regulation. So the CVMP has a number of members and expertise, but as you will have understood, we have a broad range of activities and responsibilities, and for that, to be able to fulfill those, we need the help from working parties. So the CVMP has a number of working parties, and these are, in essence, groups of experts within expertise in specific fields. You've heard about the work in environmental risk assessment, for instance, where we have one working party, or antimicrobials working party, the 3 Rs working party. So there are a number of different working parties with these specific expertise that helps the CVMP. And the members from these in these groups are primarily experts that are sourced from the national agencies throughout the EU Medicines Regulatory Network. And also, as you have understood, that the main task of these working parties is to draft guidelines and guidance documents, and also to support the CVMP on scientific matters. So in order to explain in more detail what the CVMP does, I wanted to bring in the concept of the life cycle of medicines, because the CVMP is involved in all stages of the life cycle of a veterinary medicinal product. So we have different phases, starting with research and development. We have the marketing authorization phase, and then the post-marketing phase with different types of activities and responsibilities for the CVMP. And starting with chronologically with the research and development of medicines, there are activities within the CVMP and the EMA to provide support to companies that develop medicines. And for those of you that listen to the session on in collaboration with academia, we'll have had a more detailed description of this by Valentin Nicorescu, so that information is available. But in brief, we have some main mechanism where the CVMP is able to provide help and support to industry. And that is mainly through the scientific advice. And here we have the Scientific Advice Working Party providing these draft scientific advices that are then adopted and discussed by the CVMP. And for the scientific advice procedure, these often involve more specific questions concerning development of a product when a company has come quite far in the development of the product and have some specific issues that they need to resolve, perhaps where there are no specific guidelines available, or there are specific situations where maybe strict application of guidelines is not possible. We also have the Innovation Task Force, that is a group here at the EMA where the CVMP contributes, and this is a forum for more early discussion on development of products and where it's possible to interact with developers and perhaps academic groups on their early phases of development of products. And also, as a very important part, is the development of guidance, both scientific and regulatory, that much of the work in the working parties is aiming at. So then moving on in the life cycle, we have the new applications for medicines. And this is a large part of the work that the CVMP does. The basics and the rules are described in the regulation and its annexes. So that is the framework that we are working within. And what is important to note is that the same structure and the principles apply for human and veterinary medicines. So that there is in the fundament and the grounds are very similar for veterinary and human medicines. As I said, it is the applicants that provides the data according to what is described in the regulation that should be within a dossier. And just to put things in a little bit of perspective is that this is a large process, and it takes the timetable set for this application process is 210 days. But then there are also breaks within this process called clock stops, so that this is a long process that takes perhaps several years before we can reach a conclusion on an application. And I will just try to take you through the marketing authorization process through the eyes of the CVMP, and hopefully not getting too bogged into details, but for you to get an understanding of the process and all of the work that goes into this procedure. And it all starts with the submission of the dossier from the applicant. And this is all electronic today, of course. Not too long ago, when I started as an assessor, this was all done on paper. And as an assessor, you would sit in your room and someone from administration would roll in this whole cart full of binders with papers. And so it's thousands and thousands of pages of documents that you need to assess within this application. So it's a very, very, very comprehensive material. And from the CVMP side, there is an appointment of rapporteurs. So you have two members that act as rapporteurs, and these will be responsible for doing the initial assessment. These rapporteurs are supported by their assessment teams. So behind every rapporteur, there is a team of experts for each discipline and each part of the dossier that supports them in this view. So these are usually a very big team effort. There is also something called the multinational assessment teams, and that is when we can combine resources within the CVMP so that one member can be in charge for parts of the dossier, and another member is helping out and can assess another part of the dossier if there is this is a way of using resources more effectively, basically in the network. So the rapporteurs prepare their report. This is sent to the whole of CVMP. There's a peer review system, so there are peer reviewers that are appointed that will look into and scrutinize this assessment. And of course, all of the CVMP members are free that will look at this assessment and send their comments. And there is usually a lot of discussion around this assessment. And this is done by the CVMP around the CVMP meetings. And what it all comes down to is that there will be questions that needs to be clarified, or that you note that there are things perhaps missing from the dossier. So there will be questions, and those will be put to the applicant. So what the CVMP does is that we discuss this list of questions and agree on that and in a meeting. So this is what is sent back to the applicant. And when we send this list of questions to the applicant, the clock stops. So depending on how long the applicant needs to respond to these questions, that also influences how long the whole procedure will take. But once we get the responses back from the applicant, there is a new assessment by the rapporteurs, and we have a new round of discussion, comments from the peer reviewers and CVMP members, and perhaps a new list of questions that will go another round to the applicant. So this is done until we can see that issues are resolved and that we can move forward towards an opinion of the CVMP. And that is an opinion to either recommend authorization or a refusal of this application. And what it all comes down to in the end is that we make a benefit risk assessment of all the data in the dossier to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risks of this medicine, and how to make sure that is the case. And once we have done this benefit risk assessment, we can come to an opinion. And if the benefits outweigh the risk, we can recommend, we can have a positive benefit risk assessment balance and recommend approval. And what is also important to remember here is that it's not the CVMP that makes the decision of approval, but that goes to the European Commission that takes the official decision. So once we have an authorization, the life doesn't stop there for a medicine, but there is a very significant part of the life cycle of a medicine that comes post-approval or the post-authorization phase. And basically that is everything that happens after authorization of the medicine. So any variations, any changes to the authorization is handled here, and that goes through procedures where the CVMP is more or less involved depending on the nature of these variations. There is also procedures called referrals, and these are procedures and mechanisms that allow us to resolve issues that perhaps come up. Maybe there are concerns of safety or the benefit risk balance that needs to be addressed, and then that could be done through a referral. Or perhaps there are disagreements among member states on the use. So this is a mechanism where we can discuss this and come to a harmonized decision on these types of issues. And one very important part of the post-authorization phase is the pharmacovigilance of medicinal products. And what this, in very simple terms, is that the continuous safety monitoring of the medicine. And this is an area that was, this was one of the areas where we saw the most significant changes in the regulation. So we are now building and adjusting to a new system for pharmacovigilance. But the importance of pharmacovigilance comes because it is never possible to see everything in the studies that are presented before authorization within the dossier. These studies are usually quite limited in numbers, and maybe it is not possible to cover all aspects of the use of a medicine. So that is the information that we gain once the medicine is started to be used at a wider scale in a larger number of animals in real life. So that makes it possible to perhaps detect rare adverse events that we haven't seen in before approval. And the main and absolutely most important source of information here is the adverse events reports. So this is where we get the information and the knowledge about what could be a potential issue about for these products. And I'll just very briefly outline the signal management process that we are working with now for detecting and surveilling this, the safety of medicines. And as I said, it starts with the adverse events reports. So this is a very important source of information that we have. And this is fed into the pharmacovigilance database where a signal is created. And then the marketing authorization holder, that the company can act on this signal and then propose to have some actions done for this. For example, to add in the product information a new type of adverse event, adverse reaction, for example. There is also a mechanism for the agencies, the EMA or the national agencies, to react to signals and also propose out changes. But the important point that I wanted to stress here is that it really is the adverse event reports that give us this knowledge and this possibility to react and adjust the perhaps the information of the medicines, and it all comes down to that we should be confident and make sure that there is still a positive benefit-risk balance for this product during the use in real life. As had been said quite a lot before, I will not dwell on this, but we do provide a very much guidance. And this guidance is to a large extent to provide help to the companies developing medicines, but it is also a help to assessors within the network and also to harmonize and standardize our evaluations so that we have a common approach to how to evaluate dossiers. And as I said, it is the working parties that develop the guidance, but then it is the CVMP that adopts them and publishes it. So it goes through several stages before any of this guidance is approved. And as I have also been mentioned as an example yesterday, if you were listening to Jacqueline Pote, we have possibilities to get help from further than from the working parties. For example, when we drafted the guideline on bacteriophages, it was realized that the specific expertise that was needed was not present within the working party. So then an operational expert group was created where we could find the relevant experts within and also outside of our regulatory network to collect those in a group that could draft this guideline, so we can make sure that we have the necessary expertise to fulfill these tasks. We also have not the network between the regulatory agencies and that the activities within the centralized procedures, but we also have a wider network and a wider collaboration. And we collaborate with, and we also contribute to the work with a number of European and international actors. And these are just a few examples. It's not an exclusive list, so please don't take it that. But these are just some of the examples. And I wanted to highlight or give some examples of what we do. And when it comes to the European Commissions, we have very much contact with and exchange with the European Commission. And a lot of this work has been centered around the implementation of the regulation. And you will have heard of the list of antimicrobials reserved for humans. That was a work where the CVMP was very much involved. And the collection of data on antimicrobials used in animals is a new type of work where we are now involved. We have collaborations with other EU agencies, EFSA being one of them. One current example of this is where we can sometimes take part in expert panels where the scientific opinion on vaccination against highly pathogenic avian influenza is a current and very important example of ongoing work where we collaborate with other agencies. And also going internationally, we have VICH, which is a collaboration between regions of the world, for example, the USA and Japan, where regulators try to harmonize technical requirements for authorization applications for veterinary medicines. So this is guideline work and data requirements, but at an international level rather than just the European level. So we are an organization we are a scientific committee. Our decisions should be based on science, and to do that, we need to keep our knowledge up to date. And it is really important that we get input and interactions with our others to do this, to keep our knowledge up to date. And I've just listed a few of the ways that we do this, of these different types of interactions that we do have. We have workshops and interested parties meetings, these types of interactions, focus group meetings. We have public consultations of all the documents that we produce, and the input that we get from these public consultations are very important in the development of these documents. We also do some horizon scanning to make sure to see what is happening outside and where developments are going. And we have trainings, and to accommodate this, that is a national EU network training center where we organize trainings within the network to keep our knowledge up to date and also to harmonize views on for example, new guidelines and how assessors should apply new guidelines in the work. And all of this input comes down, and it helps us to see what is happening and prioritize. And from this, we take and decide what should be included on the CVMP work plan. What should we actually work on to make sure that we have relevant activities in our work plan and produce the guideline that are needed and so that we meet the needs of those that are around us. And I just wanted to finish with this picture of a network, emphasizing again that we are part of a network, and collaboration is really our strength here, that we try to use the resources within the network and collaborate so that we really can make the best use of all the resources that we have. can produce some good and scientifically based decisions and also assessments of dossiers. So that was my last slide. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frida, for a very nice overview of what CVMP does. Just for the people in the room, you can keep your questions until the end when we take all the questions together. Of course, people online can already put questions in the chat if they wish to do so. Okay, so then we're moving to the next speaker. You might have wondered, the name of the session is Contribution of EMA and the EU Network to Veterinary Medicine, Science and Regulation. What's the industry doing there? So, the next speaker is going to introduce that and to show us why a strong regulation and science-based decision-making is also important for the veterinary pharmaceutical industry. So on my left side is Frederik Schutte. Frederik has a degree in Dutch and international law from the University of Amsterdam and also completed an LLM at Duke University in USA. He's a partner of an independent consultancy firm called Brabers that serves the interest of the sector's organizations operating in regulated markets. As a consultant, Frederik acts as the director of the Dutch trade organization of the veterinary pharmaceutical industry called VEDIN. But he also advises in other sectors such as the human medicines and medical devices. And as VEDIN director, Frederik also serves as a board member of Animal Health Europe, which is the European animal health industry organization. Frederik, over to you.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you all for the invitation, and also good to see that industry is considered an important stakeholder. And it was already my experience when I entered this building, because it started with the industry lounge, where I was asked to sit before I was guided to this room, because also industry has a different color of badge. I have a red badge. This means that you're always under supervision, and that feels very safe. And also, I'm a resident of Amsterdam, and to see this building, it makes me as a resident of Amsterdam proud, and I'm also sure that you're proud of it, Ivo, for this building. So congratulations also with that. Appreciated that from an industry point of view, and today I'll talk for the European industry. That the perspective of the manufacturers can be dealt with you, because, well, we see ourselves as the most important customer, of course, of EMA. So the topics I will cover is first, because it's an awareness day, I thought it's good to tell you a bit about the animal medicines industry in Europe. And then why a regulatory system is so important, so why also industry needs that. And, well, of course, innovation and regulatory science, and the importance of EMA in this whole process. And I will end with some challenges and opportunities. But first, the industry itself. And of course, the purpose is to provide solutions for animal health. And therefore, there's a lot of research and product development, all meant to find solutions to prevent or to manage or to treat disease. Because animals are just like people, they get sick and require medicines. But, and we stressed this already in another session, breakout session yesterday. There are other things why you need animal medicines, and it's also defense against new and emerging diseases. So, for example, the antibiotic resistance problem and zoonosis. Now, when you see the industry, first, Animal Health Europe has 12 members. These are all multinationals, big companies. but also 16 national associations representing 19 European countries, and these are also countries outside the EU, for example, the UK. But together, Animal Health Europe with the national associations represent most of the industry, but more than these 12 companies, because the national associations, of course, have many more national-orientated members. But together, the EU represents 27% of the animal medicines market in the world. I think the US is the biggest one, but Carol can complete me there when I'm saying something wrong. But the turnover is a bit less than 8 billion. But when you compare it to the turnover of human medicines, it's only 3%, which is often for people very surprising. Small market in comparison to the human medicines and highly fragmented because we have many species. The human market has one species, human. The animal sector has much more species, and I will come back to it later on. The industry itself directly has around 52,000 jobs, but around it we also have 300,000 veterinarians in the EU and 3 million livestock farms. So there's really many people involved with the care of animals. Over 260 companies, many of them are small companies. And what is important is, of course, to invest in new medicines, and on average, 8% of the turnover is invested in the research and development to find new solutions for animal health. You know, of course, all the pictograms, because I stole them from the whole fact that maybe we can work later on with pictograms. But here you see the number of animals to get an idea in Europe. So the source is Eurostat from a few years ago, I presume. It's always difficult to count the animals, especially when it's the companion animals. But when you add them together, it's over 1 billion. And when you look to the humans in Europe, it's 745 million people, so less. It's not that well. There are different markets. We cannot compare them because I just said that the turnover is so different. But we try to provide medicines for all these animals when they get sick. So it's just showing the variety. On the products itself, when you see the sorts of product, and in the second session we discussed, for example, the AMR, the antibiotic resistance, and also that the volumes already decreased in Europe with more than 40%. And you see a shift the last decade, and a bit longer even, that you see it shift from disease prevention to disease prevention, and not only the healing. So there's a shift from antibiotics, which becomes smaller, to vaccines, which is now the biggest part when you look to the categories of products used in the EU. And of course, there are also new developments to monitor animal health, diagnostic tools to identify disease more rapidly. These are all developments that at the end contribute to animal health, but not only animal health, but also animal welfare. As said, the industry is highly innovative, based on research and development, and that's why we need science also from the regulator. This is to give an idea how the time scale of the development of a new medicine, because it starts with an idea and discovery and some research, early research, and these processes can take between 2 and 4 years. After that, we have a preclinical development in the laboratory, early testing on safety, on quality, Also environmental safety, well, this takes in average like 3 years, and then starts the clinical development. Well, that goes into the assessments of animal safety, the safety of the users, consumer safety, also environmental safety, well, to prepare for the dossier on safety, efficacy, and quality of the product. And this is a development that takes between 2 and 4 years. Then starts the approval process with on a national level or with EMA directly, the central market authorization process, which takes, well, 1 to 2 years, we just heard. So in total, between 8 to 13 years before a product can be brought on the market, manufactured, and delivered to the customer. So it's a long-term development. Well, regulation. Why is regulation so important? First, we have the new regulation. The first session started with that. It was approved in 2019, entered into force 2 years, well, it's a bit more than 1 year ago, and it was intended to create a modern, flexible legal framework, so fit for the future. And what kind of changes we see? The scope of the central procedure has been broadened, like in the human medicines, and I think it's positive that the industry has a choice there. Also, innovation is rewarded. We have data protection periods also for existing products, which is new and very good to reward and stimulate innovations. There's an aim to reduce the administrative burden and also to promote harmonization. Well, this is a process that we're in an implementation phase. So at this stage, we cannot say that this aim has a positive result at this moment. What is of course important for a regulation is to provide transparency and predictability. Predictability for a company is crucial before making an investment. That's what you are developing, that you can predict the way it will be assessed, and that is also the way of assessment is transparent. What's new, of course, in the regulation, very positive requirements for innovative biologicals and novel therapies. And there's also on limited markets special clauses about reduced documentation. So good initiatives in the new regulation. So the importance of the regulation is to have a well-defined, transparent and predictable route to the market based on science. And that science part is of course very, very important. That is not from a political point of view, we do not want this product anymore. This is important that we have also a strong agency that is trusted of the expertise on science. What's also important is the timelines for the product development, and we heard it 210 days with some clock stops, but still we have timelines in there. The only timeline I think is lacking is when the Commission has to make the decision after the advice of the CVMP. I don't know whether that's an issue. The scientific guidelines that were just explained, very important also for this predictability. I think what also is very important for the public is that there is transparency towards them on the public assessment report. How did the assessment has taken place? Important for the trust towards the public. And also that the public health risks are addressed. AMR, we discussed it also in the second session. SFAC, we gather the sales, we gather the uses information per species. that we also can act on it. Also the criteria and the list of antimicrobials reserved for human use. And also what is pending now is that the rules that we have on the antimicrobial use in Europe is also applied on the foodstuff that is imported from third countries. And then EMA, because EMA is crucial for a good implementation of the regulation. And what I said before is this emphasis on the scientific advice from EMA and the member states, competent authorities and experts. So that the high level of expertise is very important for industry and also complements the way EMA presents itself. Was also important and was said also from the CVMP side, so by Frida, the dialogue, so the possibility to provide input in public consultations, and you see that industry will always will try to give the best input possible to see that there's a good exchange of opinions. Well, EMA, of course, is the gatekeeper for the execution of the regulation, so the scientific evaluation of the market authorizations, the guarantee of this transparent, predictable and consistent route to the market, the pharmacovigilance, and well, just explained by Frida, and well, in general, upholding the objectives and of protecting public health and animal health. And also the combination of EMA, that it's not only for veterinary medicines, but also for human medicines. This combination makes it very strong to our opinion. Then EMA also has, and the network has an important role for innovation. And well, what we see is that EMA fosters scientific excellence. And we've seen the examples of CVMP with all the expert groups around it. Well, the access of novel medicinal products, which was in session 4.2. Also the possibility of a scientific advice, subjects that were raised during these 2 days, and important for stimulated innovation in industry, and also for the smaller companies, so the small and medium-sized enterprises. There's also possibility to get some extra support from EMA, which is well, also very positive. And on regulatory science, the examples we have here, the support for the 3 R's, the replace, reduce, and refine animal use for the development, manufacturing, and testing of veterinary medicines. It was Sonja Beken has told us a lot about that in session 4.1. But further, you see that the industry is very much involved also in big data strategy. And you see also that EMA itself uses the big data. We have the UPD with a lot of data. Pharmacovigilance signal detection is based on big data. The SVAC gives us a lot of information on use and sales, which can help us. The environmental risk assessment also. But what is, of course, maybe innovative is also the use of digital technologies. And Hans Polder gave some examples of that in an earlier session, how these kind of techniques can help also to increase the animal welfare status. So the artificial intelligence and machine learning are ways to contribute also to animal welfare. So I will conclude with the challenges and opportunities. The challenges, well, the first one, the socio-economic and political aspects. And Yesterday in session 3, we had a philosophical discussion also on the future and the challenges of the next, well, say 5 to 10 years. And also Nancy de Bruyne gave a good presentation on the challenges of the veterinarian in the future, also with the climate change. And of course, this is also the challenges. These are also challenges for the industry, but also the public attitudes, which also fed by social media. But the attitudes toward new technologies, we have seen it in the COVID period. The acceptance of vaccination or not, which is the distrust in new science, risk aversion, is also a thing that can harm our industry. The emergent diseases, you see also by means of climate change that we get new diseases also in the EU. And how can we respond rapidly to it? And do we have the products? And aren't there non-proportionate regulatory restraints at that moment? And well, the final one, we all try to be very transparent and give a lot of information, but you sometimes think that the more information you give, the more distrust and suspicion you create. So I call this the transparency paradox. Well, when you look to the opportunity, is I think that if we are able to keep our high regulatory standards, and when we maintain them, then we also keep the trust. And well, of course, one warning, thank God we have now our own regulation, because the human medicines market is different than the veterinary medicines market. So be also real, in reality, what you ask for a market of the size of the veterinary market. But always ensure that science prevails over politics. And well, use the high reputation of EMA and its international profile. And I think we also had examples, and Karel was stating it also, that EMA has internationally a very good reputation, and we're very happy with that. The networking is a very strong asset we have in Europe, that EMA and the national competent authorities work together, but that there's also cooperation on the global level and the sharing of information with international partners. And the dialogue with industry. We can react on the public consultations. We have these sessions like this. So strong stakeholder engagement is very much appreciated, and especially on new technologies and new therapies. So the take-home message, I would say, is that there will be no innovation and maybe even future for the industry without a good regulatory framework and a trusted agency like EMA. But also the other way around, there will be no EMA without innovative industry. So thank you. I think it was Eva said, in science we trust, so let's end with that.
Thank you very much, Frederik, and really also to give the industry perspective. It is nice and reassuring for me, at least, to hear that what we do actually does help you to put safe and effective medicines on the market, and that dialogue is indeed working. So you've heard the perspective from the CVMP side and from the industry side, and now I will hand over to the next speaker, who will give the perspective of the European Medicines Agency itself. So the next speaker is Dr. Jordi Torren. He is the head of the Evaluation and Innovation Support Department here at the EMA, and he graduated as veterinarian in 1989 from the University of Autonomous of Barcelona. He joined the veterinary division of the EMA in 2000, and previously he worked for 7 years in the veterinary pharmaceutical industry. Since 2019, he's the head of the Evaluation and Innovation Support Department, as I said, in the Veterinary Medicines Division here at the EMA, where he's responsible for the coordination of the assessment of the applications for authorization of the veterinary medicinal products through the centralized procedure in the EU. And before his current position, his focus was on the area of antibiotic resistance, and in particular on the use of antibiotics in animals and its impact on public health. Jordi, over to you.
Thank you, Johan. Yesterday, when Martin was introducing a bit the timelines and he mentioned that the agency was created in 1995, I was thinking that, I arrived here in 2000, so it's already a few years. There are not that many of us left here. I think we have Joss, maybe Jana, you arrived at this time, more or less. No, not yet. Jana said no, much later. But never mind. Thank you very much. I have the difficult task to explain what we did in the network just after the brilliant presentation from Frida and also the excellent presentation from Fredrik, who also has been very kind to the agency, which it's an honor because, for us, it's a pleasure to work and to see the appreciation from the outside partners also on what we are doing, even if we give them a very hard time sometimes, because, we do give them a very hard time. And you've seen in Frida's presentation all the different list of questions, list of outstanding issues, etc. And some of the opinions go negative. So it's a complex relationship, but we are into this atmosphere all together. And one of the things that Johan said at the beginning, and to me it's very important, is that what we want to transmit is that our system is a thorough system based on science in which we authorize medicine after a very thorough process of evaluation. And this is this complexity that I'm going to try to present to you, because I'm not going to try to repeat all the things that have been said, although that will happen here and there. But basically, to highlight that when we authorize a medicine, it's not as it is portrayed sometimes in TV series or TV shows, things like that, that it's decided rapidly. No. There are many committees involved. There are experts on the different areas that we assess, and those decisions are taken as a group. And that can be very complex at times and requires hours of discussion. As the chair of the CVMP, Johan, can certify that sometimes he's probably looking at the committee and say, come on, let's reach a consensus. But this is the process, this is what we do. And every single marketing authorization goes through a very thorough process of assessment. I also want to talk a little bit about how the system is becoming more and more complex. We see more and more legislation from outside that have impact on veterinary medicines, and that's something that it's of concern for us, but also for stakeholders, and then also talk a bit about transparency. So Frida showed before the picture of the CVMP. We took advantage and that the CVMP was taking its picture, and we took one also with this secretariat. We are about 70 people. We should be at the back and the CVMP should be in front, because we are here to serve the CVMP and all other committees and working parties, but well, we took it like that. Some people are missing, notably Ivo. I think he was in another meeting, but he didn't make it to the picture. But there you are. It's about 70 people in the veterinary division, plus the CVMP, again, one member per member states, and all the experts that are behind this organization. One of the things that I found personally remarkable is to work in this environment where we have people from all the different EU countries, and you can see how we approach things with a different culture, but we reach common consensus. Maybe also I take advantage to mention that we sometimes hire people. Every year we hire 4 or 5 trainees, which bring us also some new ideas to the agency, and we are happy to see most of them leaving, then going also to work in other places after having learned about the regulation of veterinary medicines. On the next slide, I'm not going to list or read every single subject that the Novel Therapies Working Party is addressing right now, and that's been done before. And I couldn't do it as well as the chair of the Novel Therapies Working Party. But my message is, it's the complexity of the products that we are receiving is increasing. We see much more novel therapies. We see things like veterinary monoclonal antibodies, stem cells. You've seen the guidelines on phage shed therapy, where I think that we are quite progressing on what we are proposing, but there is also a lot of novelties on the area of immunologicals. And that's just some example. I don't want to forget anyone, so I'm not going to list the whole thing. Something very important for us is the EU Network Training Center. The EU Network Training Center was created some years ago, and it was an answer to the need of the network for training. So what we are doing is that the agency coordinates together with the HMA the offering of scientific and regulatory training, so colleagues can be trained on areas like, for example, environmental risk assessment, areas like genotoxicity, very, very specific subjects sometimes that usually one agency takes the lead and trains colleagues. Because what we see also at the different national agencies is a specialization in certain areas. So the whole network benefits from this specialization, and we can extend the training to the other agencies. I wanted to highlight a couple of areas where I think that there is an increase in society concerns and that in which we've been working, but we see that there is a higher demand out there for us to take our responsibility on those areas. And I want to highlight antimicrobial resistance and environmental risk assessment. And when preparing the slides, I wasn't fully aware about what will be on the presentations, but I think that during those two very interesting days, it's been shown that those two specific areas, AMR and environmental risk assessment, are two specific areas in which there is a lot of interest, not only from the experts, but also from the public attending the presentations, where there's been some very interesting questions. And there are other areas also that are of interest, 3Rs. If you were at the presentation before, and some of you were not at the presentation because you were in one of the other sessions, it was a very interesting moment in which I think that, you know, usually at this type of meeting, the difficult questions come from the public to the table, but at some point the questions were coming from this table to the public or the industry specifically. And that's an interesting movement, and it shows that the experts on this specific area are really interested into progressing to 3Rs. And personally, I was very happy when after COVID, we could restart the 3Rs working party, because we wanted to restart the 3Rs working party for a long time. We couldn't do it because we didn't have enough resources. Now we are doing that, and clearly the agency is fully committed, but also the member states. You've seen, and if you haven't seen, I recommend that you watch the video, that there is a high interest into this specific area. There is also big data strategy. I'm not going to go into there. Others have addressed this subject, including Frederick. But going back to the area of AMR, the legislation on veterinary medicines, it's very demanding. I think that what went into the legislation is something that if I look back 10 years ago, we could not have even imagined that we will be asking for data on sales and use of antibiotics in nearly every single species, animal species. That's remarkable. Once we are seeing on the SBAC project with the data on sales, we haven't seen yet the use data. Obviously, there are some countries, and maybe to highlight the Nordic countries that have been collecting those data for years. They've been the pioneers, I will say, in the world doing that. Then we saw the Netherlands also with very strong projects, and other countries that I don't want to forget any, but those I think have been very, very fundamental. Maybe to mention my own country, Spain, that has high sales of antibiotics, but they've been also very active. And on the informal CVMP meeting that is going to be taking place very soon, they're going to be addressing those issues also. Then on environmental risk assessment, we see an increased concern on the use of antiparasitics, not only in food-producing animals, but also in companion animals, but also on the data that we are getting for environmental risk assessment and on the models that we are using. So we expect we are going to have some evolution into those areas, which will add more complexity to the assessment of substances, as I mentioned at the beginning. When looking at the evolution of sales data, just as an example, We celebrated recently 10 years of the SBAC reports. At the beginning, we have 19 countries, which, in fact, those of us who were involved into this initial report were quite surprised that we managed to get data from 19 countries. That was quite a surprise and achievement for a voluntary activity. But it's even more remarkable that now we have data from 31 EU countries. And until now, that has been a voluntary activity in the European Union. From now on, it's going to be in the legislation. It is already in the legislation. But it's remarkable that that was based into a voluntary activity. One of the colleagues from industry mentioned that the SBAC is the Rolls Royce on collecting data. Was it you, Freddie, who said that? No, it wasn't you, but I must say it made me very happy. I mean, send a message to my colleagues. Hey guys, we're doing some good stuff here, and that's nice. Then something else, I want to mention the JAIACRA report. This is a report that it's a very complex report in which we analyze data on sales and resistance also from the human and veterinary side. And it's interesting because it's quite common that we get comments in the sense that the data on the human side are not considered. They are. And in fact, Frederick, you mentioned before, you say, well, the data on humans and animals is not really comparable. We do compare. In fact, there is an interesting chapter trying to compare the use of antibiotics in humans versus the use of antibiotics in animals. So we are really progressing into those areas. I hope that in the future, when we have more data on the use of the antibiotics, not only on the sales, and basically the difference is that the use will be more data at farm level. We are going to get even better analysis of those data. And I hope that this is going to be very important for the evolution of the recommendations that we are all doing. Yesterday, Luca Guardabassi made a comment about how, for example, some of the restrictions on certain types of antibiotics could result on the euthanasia of some of the companion animals, which is a valid remark, I think. I want to mention also that when we produced the report on substances not to be used in animals, we took into account also the alternatives, but obviously, there might be cases where that might happen, where animals might have to be euthanized. And that links to the concept of availability of medicines. When we also increase the requirements for the authorization of veterinary medicines, and sometimes we do referrals, we always take into account not to penalize the availability of medicines. And I think that the members of the CVMP could, speak hours on that, on how many times, even if we don't have all the data that we would like, we try not to penalize availability, because sometimes our recommendations can result on products being taken out of the market. And that's important, that we are aware that we need to maintain products on the market. Some of them are very old with no economical interest for the industry. And it's very important for us that those products stay on the market if we have the adequate data also. So there needs to be a safety threshold there, and we try to keep this one. But it's important to remember that our activities can have an impact on availability of medicines. Continuing on the issue of complexity, I just put there a request from the European Commission for a scientific report on the impact of the use of azole fungicides. And this request has gone to 5 European agencies, to EFSA, ECHA, ECDC, EMA, and the Environmental Agency. And on top of it, we indicate that the Joint Research Center should also have its opinion onto this report. I mean, most of those products are used as pesticides, but nevertheless, we also have a certain role. Certain veterinary medicinal products are used, and we are going to be dealing with this opinion. I mean, doing opinions together with other agencies, it's very complex. We all have our own system of approval of the different products. We all have our own way of proceeding. So to put the 5 of us together, it's going to be interesting, to say the least. But that's the task, and that's the beauty of what we do, because obviously it's much more rewarding to also produce a coordinating opinion that just go on your own, and then you identify that you haven't taken into account some of the aspects that other agencies can provide. Again, another example of how some things that are coming forward is, for example, the use of antibiotics, the production of antibiotics during the manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. So the European Commission has asked the agency to produce a report on GMPs for veterinary medicinal products. And the inspections working group is doing that. And in fact, they are quite advanced. And one of the points that they asked them to address is the effluence of antibiotics during the manufacturing of antibiotics. And it seems that it's going to be complex because the inspectors, basically, they're telling us it's not our area of expertise. It's also a question about what it is a GMP inspection, what it is also to go monitoring effluence. So those are two different processes. And sometimes it's difficult to get those things together. But then, and yesterday, we also heard on the presentation on environmental risk assessment that sometimes it's don't wait for the regulators. So the industry has produced this report. So this is a report from the industry, not from regulators, in which they make some very interesting proposals on manufacturing in a responsible manner. And I think that those types of activities are certainly welcome. Something else that show up during summer is that, a publication out talking about reduction of pollution to combat superbugs and other antimicrobial resistance. So it seems that all gets tangled up, and sometimes it's difficult to really detangle those things and understand which is your responsibility and what you can do in reference to that. But one of the things that the CVMP has produced, and that's a reflection paper that was on the background or the scientific input was mostly from the ERA Working Party and the Antimicrobials Working Party, is a reflection paper on antimicrobial resistance in the environment. It's a very interesting document, but the conclusions, if you allow me to sum it up, is we don't have enough information right now to produce a risk assessment of the impact of antimicrobials in the environment. Nevertheless, colleagues on the Environmental Risk Assessment Working Party, which are very active, I have to give it to them, they're really very active. They say that they see how the science is evolving and that they think that there is some hope, and maybe during the next years, we will have a bit more of data to produce some kind of risk assessment of the antimicrobial resistance and the environment. But I think that it's a question to manage here expectations. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to identify which is the impact of releasing antibiotic from a cow going into the river and, well, having manure into the river, and the impact of the small amount of antibiotics that will be there into the environment. That's not going to be, as you can imagine, that's not going to be an easy task. And then one of the points that was raised yesterday is, for example, the use of ectoparasites in companion animals. And I think that all of us who have dogs or cats, dogs in my case, we regularly give ectoparasiticides to our animals. And when you see the reflections that go into this draft reflection paper, you start to get worried. You think, well, what do I do? And I personally am waiting a bit longer now to give to them the ectoparasiticides unless I see them, really scratching. So no, you can't hold it for one more month, and because the reflection paper is quite strident on its assessment. In fact, I had comments from colleagues saying, well, that you go quite hard line into this one, but this is where the science is taking us. So we think that in this sense, it's important that we are transparent and we show where is the science evolving. But then one point that's been also raised by the industry recently in another meeting that we attended, which is the one substance, one assessment. So there is an initiative from DG Environment on trying to kind of put together the assessments of ECHA, EFSA, and the agency. And the title might be a bit misleading, one substance, one assessment, because this is far away from what we can achieve. What we are going to try to do is to put together the outcome of the studies and put it into a common database. And that's a legislative proposal that might get soon out there, or might be postponed, depending on how the discussions go in Brussels in this case. But we are trying to do something that is, I think, with a good intention, positive, we will need the resources that we require from the agency, and also if it will require, for example, from the industry that they submit certain type of data in certain format, which is something that it might be, it's under discussion. And so it's not a complex, it's not an issue that it's easy, it's complex. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. And it also leads, it adapts to this complexity of the system that I was talking before. We're also looking at nitrosamines, titanium dioxide. I'm not gonna go into the detail of this. There is a lot in our webpage about the EFSA recommendation on titanium dioxide and the activities that the European medicine is taking into that. But also there is now, ECHA has a questionnaire open on PFAS. I don't know if the period for consultation period has finalized, but it was around until now that they had a consultation period for PFAS. In principle, PFAS are outside of the scope, but it's not clear if the raw materials for pharmaceuticals will be part of this scope or not, or even if the substances in contact will also be in part of this scope. So there is a lot of activity going on into this area. And I wanted to highlight the issue of transparency, which some of my colleagues here have raised before, but for me personally, I found it very interesting. One of the things I'm more proud is that when we publish most of our guidance documents, we publish them for publication. And sometimes we have pressure from colleagues says, I need to have this document, revised and adopted as soon as possible. And sometimes we publish documents with short periods, deadlines, 1 month, things like that. But I always try to push it back a little bit, say, let's give a bit more of time. It's worth that the stakeholders have a chance to look at our guidance that they can comment. And it's not only the industry that's commenting, we see more comments from other stakeholders, and I think that that's a welcome activity. We publish the work plans of the CVMP and its working parties, that's quite transparent also, but also we publish the divergent opinions of the CVMP, which is always a very interesting document because you see a bit of the insight of the cuisine of what we are doing. When a member of the CVMP is not happy with the rest of the committee, they produce a divergent opinion. And that's a tough decision for a member of the CVMP. So if you can put yourself on the hat of a member of the CVMP, are telling to his colleagues with which they go for dinner, their friends, no, I don't agree about that. I want to have a divergent position to the rest of the committee. And we publish that. And there you see also, which could be some of the areas where one specific scientist has decided that doesn't agree with the whole committee. So Frida has already addressed pharmacovigilance, but I didn't want to go finalizing my presentation without highlighting the importance of pharmacovigilance. As it was mentioned by Frida, there has been a big change on how we do pharmacovigilance. I think that when we started the revision of or the Commission started the revision of the veterinary medicine regulation, they wanted to simplify the process of pharmacovigilance. We're not so sure if we're going to achieve that, not in the short term at least, but something I'm sure is that we're getting much more data than before. So we are going to be producing hopefully before the end of the year, a guidance on how to introduce sales and also what we call a dose factor into those products. So we are going to be able to calculate things like incidence. Colleagues are also working very hard into signal management. There is also possibilities to do inspections on pharmacovigilance. So there is a very important change on the area of pharmacovigilance. And I also want to highlight the importance of reporting adverse events. So if maybe there are hopefully some practitioners listening now, if you see that you need to report an adverse effect, please do it. Contact, usually I will say the national member state. That's the most common way of reporting adverse event, but it's important for us to get this type of information. And the objective is to improve the safety of the products authorized. That's the only objective that we have, which is that when another veterinarian uses a product, the indications on the SPC can warn them in case that there is something that's been identified. Also, the Union Product Database, I wanted to highlight the importance of the database. I mean, it's been mentioned also that some things could be improved into the union product database, but I can assure you from the experience and the contact that I have daily with colleagues working on the UPD that are really committed. You know, if you see a group working hard, that's the people doing the UPDs, and they really are doing their best to improve this database. And even if now not as useful as we all wish it will be, I think in a few months, we are going to see the importance of this database. It's already producing the results that some of the results that we want, but it's going to be slowly but safely further improve. And that's going to give us a lot of information, because at the end of the day, having data on all the products authorized in the European Union is very important for all of us. So I'm reaching on the conclusions. So the agency, with more than 25 years of history, provides the support for our scientists, for the committees, for the experts, for the a thorough assessment of veterinary medicines. So we assess the quality, the safety, and the efficacy of veterinary medicinal products. And then also we have a follow-up, which is pharmacovigilance of those products. So it's a really, again, thorough process. We've seen also an increased number of new technologies, which is a challenge, and we need to adapt rapidly to those challenges. You need to, something that it's interesting is that because the veterinary sector is smaller than the human sector, and you've seen the graph from Frederick about that, we have sometimes less experts in some areas. And we are very strict in our conflict of interest, and that causes problem to the committee, because not in many cases, but we have experts that we wanted to be part of an assessment, and we have to say, no, sorry, you have a conflict of interest, you cannot participate, or you have this type of limitation for the participation on the assessment of a product. The veterinary medicine regulation, but also combined with Brexit, I think the first time I heard mentioning Brexit during this 2 days meeting, which is interesting because Brexit was mentioned all the time before, but let's not forget, most of us had to move from England to here. COVID was obviously for all of us a big shaker, has also bring us more teleworking work, but also with a lot of changes on the way in which we work, but also combined with new ways of working. During lunchtime, we were mentioning ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. I don't know how we are going to use those technologies, you know, but certainly we need to adapt to those technologies and rapidly. And there is a bit of change fatigue on the system, I will say. I think we are looking forward for a period of stability, have the new regulations settle down, make sure we are 100% into every single article of the legislation. We've clarified every single argumentation we might have with, for example, the Commission, and we have a few of those, you know, that everything is clear, black and white, and, you know, a bit of air to breathe and dedicate to other things, like, for example, training a bit more, which is one of our objectives. But also, and that's my final point, the new legislation has brought us some new databases, some new tools that we are going to be able to use in the future. And even if those have been costly, not only for us, but also for stakeholders, I think that during the next years, we're going to discover more and more some of the benefits of those new tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordi. And, you know, Jordi, as an insider, I of course know what's going on. But when you all put this together, I think, you know, wow, what a number of topics that we work on very hard with so many people in Europe, and yeah, and the broad range of topics, and it's really impressive. And of course, we always have our challenges that will always be there. But if you see what we did achieve and are achieving, I think we can be proud. I think we are. Europe is the front runner in many of these areas. So I think. Yeah, thank you for giving that overview. And I think also, you know, the three speakers really brought together nicely the topics of these 2 days Veterinary Awareness Day. So with that, I think we have some time for questions. So before I go to the chat, I'll just check and scan the room first. Are there any questions from the room? No, I can see if there's any in the chat. Okay. Yes. Okay. So there is one from Anja Holm. So first of all, Anja, nice to see that you're in the audience. The new pharmacovigilance system seems to be created only for large companies. However, also new SMEs working on the first product application must present a fully functional pharmacovigilance system at submission, which may be 1.5 or 2 years prior to any product reaching the market. Pharmacovigilance is not the most pressing issues for companies at this stage, so maybe this could be simplified or alleviated until later in the process. Well, that's a very interesting question, and before I think I'll hand over to you, Ivo, or to Jordi. Thank you for the question, and from my side, I just want to emphasize that I fully recognize the challenges that SME companies have, and of course the agency is certainly helping in that area with the SME office and so on. In relation to pharmacovigilance, I think SMEs bring also very new and novel therapies to the market. So I think it is important that once these reach the market, that they will be able to collect and progress the reports that are given to them. So from the field use, so there is of course a certain important element to that. So, but now I'll hand over to Ivo, please.
Sorry, thank you, Johan, and also thank you, Anja, for asking that question. And I would also like to thank you for asking that question very early on in the session. So we did have a time to look into what does the regulation say and how can we handle this, because obviously we cannot go against regulation. Now, I do recognize the situation as a challenging one, because at the one hand, the regulation, one of the objectives is to stimulate innovation and to make sure that new products can be developed and can be brought forward for authorization and brought to the market. And I think it may contain some elements that may appear to be blocking that innovation, or at least make it more difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises to actually bring these products to the market. But when looking into the regulation, it is actually quite clear in that at the time of submission, what needs to be submitted is a summary of the pharmacovigilance system master file. And when you look into secondary legislation, that is actually even more clear, because it should submit a PSMF number, a place where that PSMF, the pharmacovigilance system master file, is being kept, the name of the qualified person, also the address of that qualified person for pharmacovigilance, signed statement, and also where the data is being stored. And where the data is being stored, that could very well be for smaller companies, the EV web or the data warehouse in the pharmacovigilance system. So that's the summary, but you can only have a summary if you indeed have that system developed and in place. So I don't think we can change the regulation. Regulation is there. However, for small and medium-sized enterprises, it doesn't mean that they have to set up all these systems themselves. And very often what we see is that they use consultants or CROs that do the work for them. And we do know that this is a burden for them. But we could not accept that if there is a positive opinion on a product and the product is being marketed, that it would be done without having a pharmacovigilance system in place. I think there's it is a question for regulatory interpretation, I would say. I think that if we ask our legal advisors, that they will go for the very strict interpretation and say, no, this is what the regulation says, this is what you need to have in place at the time of submission, and this is what you need to have in place once you market the product. So very much like your answer, really, Johan. I'm not sure that there is an elegant way out of this. Over.
Thank you very much. Nancy, please.
Thank you very much for all the presentations to in this last session. It really brought it all nicely together, all the enormous work done and the challenges, but also opportunities. When I saw the slide, Jordi, with some of the future challenges around antiparasitics and environmental risk assessment, one immediately aquaculture jumped onto me. And maybe this was discussed already at the session on yesterday afternoon, but I didn't attend that because for aquaculture, we see that more than 60% of our aquaculture products are imported. Aquaculture is growing all over the world, but it's not at all in the EU. And the biggest challenge that aquaculture has are parasites. So just question to Jordi and Frederick, what is the future for antiparasitic products in the EU for fish?
The short answer is I don't know. I mean, to be honest, we certainly try to make sure that there are no lack of treatment for animals, and obviously aquaculture has been a hot topic in our list. We are currently working on an aquaculture list. It's one of the last mandates that we are preparing, and we are going to be doing a consultation as we did with the equine list. My colleague Sebastián Giraud is in charge of this one, and we are going to be asking, to the sector, what are the needs on aquaculture. But as colleagues from the Environmental Risk Assessment Working Party, and Ricardo just gone, but never mind, Michael is here, he can, certify that we are lacking models for aquaculture. And I can tell you, for example, we've been talking with the colleagues from the FDA. I'm very glad we have two colleagues here from the FDA. Tomorrow we're having a session with them, and that's one of the things that we're also discussing. Environmental risk assessment and aquaculture is one of the hot topics into this list. Hopefully we will find solutions that are satisfactory for everyone, but it's certainly one of the areas that it doesn't look easy. Why to deny it? I mean, we've seen the problems in some countries, high producers of salmon outside of the European Union, but I can tell you that every time where there is salmon in the European Union, colleagues from Norway are immediately, paying full attention about what's going on. So going a bit back into the network, there is high interest into the network into this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. Yeah.
Well, I think it's already challenging to have products for aquaculture on the market. So the more criteria we get and problems, that won't help. But in your specific question, we have to take that back to our members.
Michael?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Indeed, that's one of the challenges. And just on the point that was just made in terms of criteria, unfortunately, while there can be maybe some facilitation in terms of data requirements, the environment, just because aquaculture, especially open sea aquaculture, has a huge impact or may have a huge impact on the environment, especially the surrounding environment. Environmental risk assessment is not really one of those areas where there can be significant data reduction in order to stimulate that. So what we can do, what was discussed yesterday at the session, is to develop a guideline so that we at least have harmonized criteria in how to assess that. But that is not a task that is very easy because there's different environments, I mean, in Europe we have the Mediterranean, we have the Atlantic, so all of this is not really easy to consider. So it makes things a bit more complicated, but we're working on it.
Yes, we do work on it, and that will certainly also increase predictability at least. So that is at least something that would help. I have to say, my IT department at my agency just decided to close down my computer. I don't even know for what reason. So I can't look at the chat. So if there's any further questions in the chat, then please could you read out it? Or the normal questions. Are there any further questions in the room? Carl, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to the panel, and very interesting insights, as Nancy said. I have a question really about the role of how EMA or how CVMP sees its role in public communication. And I ask that because, as Frederick said in his presentation, we see more and more discussions, debates societally about big subjects, vaccination hesitancy, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of misinformation. And of course, what could or should be the role of EMA? Is there, do you envisage doing more public communications, maybe even, dare I use the word, political communications, to correct some misunderstandings, for example, on AMR transfer or on vaccine perceptions? I don't know if EMA sees itself in that role, and if it's not comfortable with that, or is going to do more or less of that. So I would like you to philosophize. Sorry for that philosophical question, Ivo, but philosophize about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Ivo, please.
I'm taking on the challenge here, Kyle. No, there is definitely a role for the agency, and we've been taking up that role during the COVID crisis already. There's a lot of misinformation out there, which became very apparent during the COVID crisis. And particularly in the human area, we're very active in trying to deal with that and providing the public with the right information. And I think in the way that we do it through the JIACRA report, it's in there, but I think we should look at different ways on how we can communicate better some misperceptions that there may exist. Is it a role for CVMP? That's another question. It's not in the terms of reference, let's put it that way. So, but we would always do this with the support of the experts that we have in the network. So with the support of CVMP, with the working parties that we have, whenever it's appropriate, they would be involved in the preparation of these communications, and we would always run them past CVMP. We are responsive. We're not proactive. So in that sense, we're not trying to put things on the agenda where we think, oh, we may expect something in the public to develop here and there. AMR, communication on AMR has been on the agenda of the Heads of Medicines Agency meetings over the past years, particularly because of what you've just been saying. The focus is very much on the use of antimicrobials in veterinary practice, not necessarily linking AMR problems that may occur in human practice to the actual use of antimicrobials in humans. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do there. And we have our transparency policy as well. So we try to be as transparent as possible. We got a big stakeholder communication division department here at the agency. And we, from the veterinary division, are more and more interacting with them. And the Vet Awareness Day, I think, was a good start. We've turned it into a Vet Awareness Week here at the agency, where we would also like to educate our colleagues from the human side on the importance of veterinary medicine. So yesterday, in an area that you, as an industry representative, cannot access, Karel, we had a beekeeper here telling about, his practices as a beekeeper. Today, we have a small dairy producer in the coffee bar. We've put notices on the screens about to create more awareness about the importance of veterinary medicines. So even inside the house, I would say we still have a lot of work to do.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we have time for one final question. There, one more question? If not, then I would just like to thank the three speakers for this session and close the session. And with that, I will hand back to Ivo.
Okay, I've been given 15 minutes to wrap up these 2 days, but the 15 minutes started already 10 minutes ago, so I will try and keep it short and sweet. And I've also invited Martin here, who was at the opening session yesterday. So I trust he can keep it short and sweet as well. I look back at 2 very interesting and inspiring days. They were stimulating. I think, I hope it's for all the people that were in the meeting as well. What we try to do in the Vet Awareness Day is to provide an overview of the breadth of, veterinary medicines, the authorization, and how it links to society, consumer safety, environmental safety, antimicrobial resistance, all the different topics that we have discussed over the past 2 days. Originally, because Emer mentioned yesterday in her opening that she was amazed that this was only the first Veterinary Awareness Day, we had it scheduled for April 2020. We had invited all the speakers. There was a program there, and we had to. It was just after the opening of this beautiful building. We thought, let us be the first ones to organize a big meeting in this building. It was really designed as a face-to-face meeting where we could bring people together, where they could network, and where we would actually be able to liaise with consumers, organizations, academia, etc. The world has changed. We had to cancel because of COVID, and the world has changed to the extent where now hybrid meetings are much better, and we can reach out to a wider audience in these hybrid meetings. But I'm really happy to see that all the speakers were able to travel here, and that we were able to meet, have lunch together, and have interesting discussions, not only related to veterinary medicinal products, but also to other things. So I think it was a good meeting in that sense, and I look forward to organizing, or to someone else organizing, the next Veterinary Awareness Day, maybe 3 years from now. Sounds like a good timing. For me, it is for sure. The only thing that I had a plea for that as well before. The only thing that I do regret is that we were not able to put it in a program that allowed us to participate in all the discussions. So we had to split up in several sessions. So maybe there's a lesson to be learned for the next time. Looking back, starting yesterday morning with the more general sessions, welcomed by Emer, and then Eva Zamora on behalf of the Commission, picking up on that, on the role of the Commission, but I think giving an excellent introduction to the Vet Awareness Day in flagging up all the areas, specifically in relation to the veterinary regulation. But that's what we are. We work inside the framework of the regulation on veterinary medicinal products. But that has all these interfaces that we try to flag up later on. I won't dwell on my own presentation, but Martin clearly gave the message that we do this not only for Europe, but in the wider global context. What we do as an agency, both in human and veterinary medicines, does have that global impact. And following a discussion there, I think there's more that we can do on the veterinary side, together with the network and the veterinary medicines division, in training, maybe in liaising with competent authorities in other regions that are still in development. Not only we, but also in conjunction with the colleagues from FDA, the more, let's say, the more developed agencies supporting the lesser developed agencies to set up their regulatory systems. We had a plenary session yesterday on antimicrobials, with where the message from my side and that we would like to give is that antimicrobials, there's a lot of in the regulation on antimicrobials, the list of antimicrobials, the collection of sales and use data, but there is a clear link also to innovation that is needed to assist in curbing the risks of, controlling the risks of antimicrobial resistance, and also a clear link to a later session, research gaps that are still out there that we need to fill in to get a better understanding of what is the impact of all these measures we're taking on the veterinary side. on really controlling the risk of antimicrobial resistance, veterinary and human. In that session, after Zoltan's presentation on what we do as an agency and as a network in the context of limiting the risk of AMR, I think a very nice presentation by Professor Guardabassi on, concepts that they're trying that could replace the use of antimicrobials, but also flagging up the regulatory challenges that are existing in that area. Then Jacqueline Poot took us on a warp speed journey into the outer reaches of veterinary novel therapies, and I think it's one of the if we were to award a prize for the best presentation, she certainly would be high up there in making something which is really difficult quite accessible, I think, to a wider audience. And then Noemi outlining the EMA activities to promote the availability of veterinary medicines and to support faster innovation and to invite developers of novel therapies to come to us and interact with us. I learned from the discussion that ESVAC, the European Sales and Collection of Data on Veterinary Antimicrobials, is perceived as the Rolls-Royce under the reports of antimicrobials consumption, and it sets an example, as we do I think in many cases, for other regions on how they can follow up. In the session on environmental risk assessment, we had our pistachio specialist, Michael Empel, who explained the basics of the environmental risk assessment for VMPs. We had Haru outlining current issues and discussions surrounding environmental impact of VMPs, especially when they're used for pet animals, and concluding that albeit there are concerns, more research, data, and discussions at international level are needed to decide whether such products constitute a risk for the environment or whether the current environmental risk approach for such products needs to be changed. And after this talk, Ivo Roesink, difficult name to pronounce, I understand that, Ricardo, I don't know if you're still around, Roesink, gave an animated and provoking presentation about entry routes for chemicals, including pharmaceuticals, in the environment and their effect on non-target organisms. And he focused in particularly on effects occurring at non-lethal concentrations, which might have a considerable impact on the behavior of these organisms, ranging from fish swimming slower, snails losing grip or being eaten, to octopuses getting confused or forgetting where the location of their food is. A lively and productive discussion followed, revolving around the origin of these residues found in the environment, as well as the potential creation of a monograph system, substance-based monograph system. We had a discussion on animals and society. I gave a summary on that as well, which also ended into more philosophical discussions on the future and linking it to climate change and really saying that maybe we should rethink some of the ways that we do business here. I will keep repeating that, Frederick. Animal welfare. Discussions, the presentations started with chair and the vice chair of the 3Rs working party presenting past and current activities of that working party and outlined the clear commitment of the agency and the network, I would say, to implement regulation of the implementation of the 3Rs principle in medicines testing and development, for instance, through the provision of guidance on the regulatory acceptance of alternative methods as requested by industry, or tangible actions such as the recommendations of the use of 3R compliant methods for batch release testing of VMPs. And after this, and I think that was a surprise for a lot of you, an interesting presentation by Hans Spolder, addressing it from a totally different angle, which detailed that the welfare of livestock animals is directly linked with the health of these animals, and that the mental state of livestock should also be considered. Following a lively and very interesting discussion addressed not only the uptake of 3Rs methods in the testing of medicines, but also more broad issues related to livestock, animal husbandry and food production, in which the consideration on the welfare of animals slowly moves from and I like that really, a reduced suffering approach to a life worth living approach. And I don't think it was ever presented in that way, at least not to this audience. So really thankful for Hans for doing that. Then discussion on collaboration with academia, with also some very good presentations, I would say. A presentation on collaboration with academia on regulatory science activities. So again, stressing that we do have a vision on regulatory science and what that regulatory science ideally would bring to the agency, but we do need the interaction with academia to really deliver on regulatory science strategy. And that collaboration with academia is indeed one of the strategic goals in the regulatory science strategy. A second presentation, the deep dive into the regulatory science and research in veterinary medicines regulation by Anna Vidal, provided an overview of some of the activities that are supporting the agency's goal to enable and leverage research and innovation for veterinary medicines, and highlighted the importance of engaging with research partners to advance regulatory science. And this included an overview of the regulatory science research needs in this area, a description of the process for engaging in externally funded regulatory science initiatives. And it also touched upon the EMA procurement mechanisms to support the funding of research projects and how that can be used to respond to some of our more pressing research needs. And the last presentation by Valentin provided a detailed overview of the types of support and assistance offered by EMA to veterinary academic stakeholders, including scientific advice, innovation task force briefing, meetings, scientific guidance for veterinary medicines, and the agency's support to small and medium-sized enterprises, and how these tools contribute to fostering research and innovation in regulatory context. And that message was brought in several meetings, including the last session that we had today on how we would like to support this. I will not try to summarize the last meeting because it's still fresh, but I would like to end, at least for my part, with other challenges that maybe were not mentioned in this Vet Awareness Day, in challenges for the network, the regulatory network, challenges on sustainability of the network, with changes in regulation, not only challenges for the industry, but also challenges for the network. Sustainability could be, financial sustainability, but also the human resources are an issue. How can we make the work of the regulators, and how can we make it attractive? How can we attract young people to enter into the regulatory business? And how can we ensure that they don't leave for industry after we've been training them? But also the access to expertise that is needed for novel therapies and for areas like 3Rs. And when I say expertise, I also mean experts, but not necessarily the same. And when I say experts, is, as Jordi pointed out, how can we liaise with experts that are not conflicted in interests that they may potentially have? So just to name a few, and that could be very well a topic for future discussions. So having said all this, I look back at 2 very productive days with interesting discussions. And I would like to hand over to Martin to give his reflection, and then I will close the meeting, Martin.
My gosh, I feel like a fraud closing the meeting. I clearly missed out on 2 really interesting days. Yeah. I'm sorry to have left. You've summarized quite a lot of what I was going to say anyway. It's not for the first time, but a lot of the focus has been quite rightly on the veterinary medicines regulation. We're glad we're not using the word new anymore, and on the work within the European Union. And I really want to leave a flavor that we are incredibly conscious of the impacts of our work beyond the European Union, the immediate boundaries. I mentioned yesterday the work within the European neighborhood and the work we're doing with the IPA program, and the candidate countries, the potential candidates. It's a very important part of our work. We're working, we talked about food safety, animal husbandry, and animal welfare. Ivo talked about promoting reliance, and this is something which is really, really central to what my team does in collaboration with the veterinary division. Ivo mentioned training, and this is something which is really, really important. So and we will be engaging with this increasingly as we go along. The fact that we have 2 colleagues from the FDA present in the room, and we have many more colleagues from the FDA present this week in the building, it recognizes 20 years of cooperation with the US FDA on human and veterinary medicines. And I just want to perhaps just finish with this, that Naomi Garcia spoke about innovation, support, and availability. And I think a lot what we're trying to create and promote as a message to not just the pharmaceutical industry that Rick is representing, but also to academia, which is we are working to support global development programs. So what we can do to work with other regulators to support global development programs of veterinary medicines and to align with our regulatory partners is an incredibly important part of what we do. I floated the figure of about 80% of our committee's work having some sort of international touch point. I really do want to emphasize this. It's incredibly important what we're doing here and the fact that we have the FDA colleagues here. So it is about aligning, it's about a role for food safety, about working with partners and transboundary diseases and those sorts of things. But it's also about supporting industry and the availability of innovative veterinary medicines. And we will work, and we are working with industry and academia and other stakeholders to make sure we actually support and promote the availability of these medicines. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to leave and finalize on that note.
Oh, thank you very much, Martin. I think that was a clear message as well. Before I close the meeting, I need to thank a few people, because I first of all, the contributors that have all been traveling here and been presenting, and the moderators of the session. A great thank you to all of you, because I mean, you've made it work. But in the preparation of this meeting, you've all been liaising with my veterinary strategic support team. I call them my team because they've been working on this. And this meeting would not have been a success without all the efforts that they have put in that. I know that a tremendous amount of time has been put into trying to organize all these sessions and making sure that we can give the message that we want to, and move away from a purely technical meeting that we've always been doing during the info days into sessions that are interesting for a wider audience. So I would like to have an applause for that support team. They're sitting in the back of the room. They've done an awful lot of work. It's not only, can I have the next slide, please? I've got Sylvia back there, Katarina. It's her birthday today, so I think we should sing for her. And Jana, and again, guys, great thank you.